We are live. It's live with Bottleneck. I'm Jamie J, the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance, where we help stop the bottleneck in your business. But you're going to find out pretty soon that's not what we're here for today. I'm not talking anything about that. We're going to be talking to Ben Stroup. So please stay tuned. We'll be back in about 38 seconds. Hello, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Periscope, by the way. Nice to see you. My name is Jamie J. I am the CEO and founder of Bottleneck Distant Assistance, where we try to help stop the bottleneck in your business. This is Live with Bottleneck, and today we're going to be talking to the one and only Ben Stroup, and we're going to be talking about no one cares until you sell something. And Ben is the president of Velocity Strategy Solutions, LLC. And why, oh, why can Ben help you stop the bottleneck in your business? Well, let me tell you. Ben Stroup is Chief Growth Architect and President at Velocity Strategy Solutions, where he helps leaders design, develop, and deploy smarter business growth strategies. Ben is a futurist, he's a disruptor, and a data champion. He leads a team that takes a structured learning approach to business challenges, which allows them to assist leaders in bridging the gap between ideas, innovation, and revenue, taking ideas from mind to market. And the title of the live stream that you want to discuss, and the title here is Don't Solve the Problem, Solve the Source of the Problem. Solving the problem rather than the source delays the inevitable. This is often hard to do when lagging indicators don't yet necessitate change. So we're talking lagging indicators, leading indicators. We're talking all kinds of cool business stuff today. Without any further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Mr. Ben Stroup. How are you, sir?
Hey, how are you? It's great to be here.
Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I feel like I should put my glasses on so maybe I could get
You look fantastic, man. Always
I even busted out the polo shirt for this call today because, no t-shirt for this.
Nice.
Well, I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about who you are and background before we jump into what in the heck do you mean by no one cares until you sell something?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the first 8 years of my professional career in corporate sales and marketing across several different verticals, from technology to retail to publishing, and really started to see toward the 2008, 2009-ish, the emergence of what we now understand as inbound marketing. And so, as the marketplace was beginning to engage with vendors differently, vendors hadn't quite yet learn to adapt to this new reality that was being facilitated by this really emerging tool at the time called Google. And so I saw an opportunity after having rebuilt a legacy business around those principles to make that possible for all businesses to take advantage of it. And if you can remember the time, 2008, 9, 10, you started to see a lot of transition in businesses. We were doing the reset after the recession and the mortgage crisis and all of that. And companies were anxious to invest in new business development techniques, but they were not yet ready to make those permanent positions. And the core competencies hadn't been rooted yet in the same way that they are now at the time. And so I grew that for 4.5 years, started to acquire enterprise clients probably within a year. And one of those in particular, I worked with for over 3 years, and we just revolutionized the business. As a result of that, they were owned by a larger entity. That CEO flew down to Nashville and offered to make me part of their leadership team and help him through some significant change initiatives. So I looked at that as an opportunity to take what was a growing and emerging business and take that to the enterprise, which I was very, very excited about. So I spent the next 3 years there working really in a lot of shadow CEO capacities, working on some merger and acquisition activity, acquiring 2 technology tools that really introduced technology MRR into the business of a traditional professional service firm.
And when you say MRR, you're talking about monthly recurring revenue.
Monthly recurring revenue. That's exactly right. Rebuilt some departments, and then reestablished how their go-to market strategy and market engagement around some of the core things that I was doing. So a lot of things, honestly, Jamie, that I probably wasn't old enough or qualified to do, but he just really believed in me and gave me the opportunity to do some things that really showed me that I was capable of doing things that I had never even imagined. When my time was up there, then a CEO of a global nonprofit reached out and asked if I would help him with some change initiatives inside that organization, and was a little, wondering if that was the right place for me. But I thought, wow, what a significant footprint, nearly $200 million a year in revenue, 2,000 employees, 30 offices around the world. And if I could help rebuild some of their revenue engines, then it would be a really amazing opportunity to do both things. One, exercise my skills that I'd really developed on the for-profit side, but also, make a contribution back to the world in a positive way, which I thought was just a wonderful thing. And one of the things that I've learned, Jamie, is that when I meet really smart people who are unbelievably successful and they give me the opportunity to work with them in some capacity, I almost always try to find a way to make that possible. It doesn't always, obviously always end up in I'm working for somebody as an employee situation, but wow, I mean, those are just moments and times when people are willing to pour into you. And that's something you can't get from any book or any classroom anywhere. So really grateful to have had so many people over the years that have risen up, given me opportunities that were beyond what I knew I had capacity to do, but they saw it. And then that allowed me to learn and grow and expand and develop. So over the next 3 years, worked with that organization to be able to repair and rehabilitate some what I call mature business lines and get those moving in the same direction. And after a couple of data projects, we learned how to normalize measures across some of those core mature departments, and saw multi-million-dollar growth within the first 12 months and a multi-million-dollar decline in expenses. It's kind of that V curve that makes the CFO tear up just a little bit.
Yeah.
And of course, at that point, when you have that kind of success, clearly you don't have enough to do. So I was given a special project that was really a digital prospect campaign. And we were able to generate $1 million in revenue 2 months earlier than planned timeline and 40% under budget. And we took that learning and built an entire department that we called strategic development that was designed to launch and rehabilitate new and existing cause concepts around digital development of donors and revenue. And so just a tremendous opportunity. About 2018, I got the notion for what became Velocity. And it was about that time that I started to look around and realize that what was happening outside of organizations was changing faster than what leadership teams within large organizations were able to understand and grasp. And it doesn't mean that they weren't really smart people, but they were so insulated by the organization, the workflows, the processes, by the scorecards that they were being measured by. They were all getting an A. And so there wasn't a lot of incentive to pay attention to the massive upheaval that was happening. And I saw a real opportunity to be a bridge, if you will, a catalyst for change within organizations that didn't create a new dependency, but really elevated the capacity of organizations to engage the market in a much more responsive way. And so I started to realize that there were, as I was leading these change initiatives, and one of the characteristics of my entire career has been that if it's a problem we don't know how to solve, an obstacle we don't think that can be overcome, or a question that can't be answered, give it to Ben. That's been kind of a recurring theme. And I love that because the intensity of the immersion process, the intensity of discovery, of learning and growing and adapting are all parts that are muscles that I've been able to develop. So I saw this opportunity of massive change outside of an organization, massive insulation at the leadership table. How do you bridge those two worlds together where you only have really two options, right? You've got really smart consultants. They can come in and tell you a bunch of things about your organization and about the marketplace, but they leave you with the stinging reality that you probably don't have the capacity to implement. And there's nothing worse than being tasked with creating, a new revenue initiative or rehabilitating an existing one or accelerating something that's there. And then you have all these great ideas and you can't do anything with it. It's a very unfortunate reality. Or the other side of it is you have agencies, and I love my agency friends. But they built an agency around their core competencies. And as long as you need one of their core competencies, they will help you do it efficiently and at scale. But what happens if you're in between? How do you find your way when you need to really build consensus at the leadership table? And by the way, trying to build consensus across leadership teams is like herding tigers.
Yeah, it's a bunch of type A's.
Absolutely. So how do you normalize that? Then once you get everybody to agree, how do we define what success is? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more because I think that is so important. Everyone says, well, success is growth, success is revenue. Well, guess what? Sometimes those realities are conflicting, even though if they sound complementary to one another. And that's really what's keeping some organizations back. And then that last part, how do we raise up interdisciplinary and interdependent teams to foster a culture of learning, as I call it, where we have this laboratory of experimentation. And once we land on the right formula, how do we then carefully and intentionally inject that back into core operations so that it doesn't distract from current reality and current revenue, but it ultimately we perfect
and it doesn't deter any of the people working there.
100%. And then it elevates the capacity of the entire organization because it's already been tested and there's some proof of performance within that. And then you put it into production, if you will, and you get everybody moving together. And so that was really the idea of velocity. How in fact do we get multiple parts of the organization organized around the customer, donor, constituent, client, whatever context you're in? And how do we flex our muscles to take what we know and have experienced, what we're learning and what we're seeing in the data, and what we know how to do as far as test and learn methods as a way to find our way forward? Now, mind you, this is 2018, 2019. Everything's humming along beautifully. I mean, we are in a time when it's just unbelievable growth, right? If you think it, you can make it true. It almost felt like that. It almost really did. It felt like you could fly. And so when I left and started Velocity, I was looking for people who felt or who believed that they needed to change and believed that growth was important. They had a bias toward action, and they believed that growth was important. And had some early success with some people who really believed in what was happening, and we were able to see some tremendous results. And then 2020 hit, and no one knew what was going to happen. I didn't know if that meant everyone was going to disappear. But what ended up happening is I no longer had to ask a leader if they were aware if they needed to change, adapt, and grow. Okay, everyone was like, yes. So the question was, where were you on the spectrum? To oversimplify it, were you sitting in a corner waiting for things to go back to the way that they were? Or were you leaning in and using this as a time to leap forward? And, call it, providence, luck, opportunity, whatever. I ended up in the camp of a bunch of people who said, let's lean in and let's take the hill. And so 2020 became how fast can Ben run, to keep up with everybody that's happening. It was just unbelievable, tremendously exciting and complex challenges, everything that I had designed to do. And I started to see some commonalities and some common problems. And that really led to some key insights coming out of 2020 and into 2021 that's really kind of shaping where we're headed. And one of the areas that I see systematically break down across organizations is on the revenue operations side. And I kind of define revenue operations as the doorknob, Jamie. nobody thinks doorknobs are sexy, right? Nobody wakes up one day and says, I'm going to make $1 billion a year selling doorknobs. But think about the perfect door. When you walk up to a house and you see a beautiful hand-carved door, the etched glass, everything about it is just amazing, right? It almost take your breath away with the right types of doors and the right type of architecture. But if that door didn't have a doorknob, you wouldn't see anything else but the fact that it didn't have a doorknob. And because it didn't have a doorknob, we're not really sure it can function in the way that it was intended.
Yeah.
So
can you open the door?
Absolutely. You can't open it. You can't close it. You can't lock it. That's how I describe revenue operations. It's a doorknob. When it's there, everything is perfectly in order and operating as intended. When it's not, it's blatantly obvious and unbelievably dysfunctional. And so in this new world, this age of the customer, if you will, where brands are being asked to inject humanity in the age of empathy, and we're coming out on the other side of what it's really going to take to win and succeed moving forward, we have to be fundamentally organized around the customer. And that means that there are four incredible challenges that organizations have in this new reality that revenue operations and velocity is really honed in on being able to solve. One is that you have to align sales, marketing, and service. The age-old debates of, hey, marketing generated some leads, sales like the leads are crap, service is like, gosh, what did you sell? That all has to go by the wayside. We have to align sales, marketing, and service teams. We have to simplify technology. B2B research tells us that most companies are using at minimum 90 different pieces of technology across sales, marketing, and service. Just wrap your head around that. Everything from extensions so the deposits of data are everywhere. And guess what happens when people leave, move, change, whatever? Things get broken, and they didn't even know it was broken in the first place. So technology is an impediment, not an acceleration point. The other part is it's unbelievably complex. And we have so much within our organizations today, small and large, that's processed by personality. It might be a solopreneur that now has a team. It might be a small team that's now growing. It might be a growing team that now has multiple locations. But until you get those business workflows and processes out of your head and into some type of documented format, it's complex. And if in a business in today's world, at the speed in which we have to move, if you have to pause and wonder what's coming next, it's not going to work. Nope. And then that last part is you got to drive revenue. And that's really where the saying comes from. It's from my first sales manager. I'll never forget it. He says, Ben, nothing happens until someone sells something. And every time that I've been asked to bring something new to market, to evolve a product, to rehabilitate or reestablish a mature business line, whatever the idea is, whatever the plan is, if you can't attach revenue to it, then it's not real yet. And until you attach revenue to it, you can't really do much with it, which is why in almost every client scenario that I work in, we approach it from what I call the reverse funnel. We start where the revenue is happening and we work up, because the further up the funnel you go, the further you are from revenue, and the clearer you are about what's driving revenue, the more precise you will be about where you can make your investments ahead of the revenue to actually result in that revenue. So I know that was a long answer to your question, but I feel like my entire career, I've never fit in any one spot that I've been in until now. And I feel like in today's world, this interdisciplinary, interdependent function of strategy and data and execution and different contexts and constantly learning, I finally, feel like I can offer something unique to the world that is really helping people live into their dreams and their hopes and their aspirations for themselves, their work, their business, their customer, their client, whatever. And it is one heck of a time to be alive.
If you aren't lying. So just out of curiosity, what did you study in school?
So I was a liberal arts major,
okay.
and actually studied religion. At one point in my life, I thought I was going to be a pastor, realized that was not the right path. It was not going to be a good fit. My track that I studied was psychology and ethics. So I became really focused in on how people create meaning and how people evaluate the world around them, which is a really fascinating to reflect on this past year, as we've all been faced with some level of disorientation and have had to lean back on our ethical frameworks and our moral frameworks to be able to determine meaning and direction in that. And then my minor was in communication. I fell in love with social movement theory. And in that, one of the things I loved about it is how could you move mass amounts of people, who came at a certain scenario, cause, or whatever from multiple vantage points, and really drive that forward. And then I had a second minor in Greek and Hebrew. So clearly, I was set up to go on to that that divinity school route and that, but just through some circumstances in life that didn't materialize for me, and many people ended up in the sales and marketing world and just fell in love with it.
Yeah. Well, and because the reason I asked that, I had some kind of an inkling that what you went to school for may not have necessarily been what you were doing now. And the reason I asked that was because early on in your introduction there, you were talking about how you had the fortunate ability to work with some amazingly brilliant minds that you just kind of were a sponge to. What do you think were some of the attributing factors to being able, and the reason I'm asking this question is maybe someone else that's watching this can maybe learn from some of the things that you've done, or the way that you've presented yourself in such a way that attracted someone that was just killing it, right? And you were able to kind of come in there and really learn from these people in such a way that it kind of maybe built the foundation that you now run Velocity from.
Absolutely. Well, I think what really contributed to my framework, which I'll describe here in just a minute, was really bizarre until last year. I grew up in a world, you grew up in a world where, you went to school, then you got a job, you didn't do anything criminal, unethical, or stupid. You got the pension, the retirement plan, and you went on about your life. That was my parents' reality. And that was the reality that I grew up in. I didn't know any entrepreneurs. I just didn't know those. And when, my parents talked about them, or I heard from friends of my parents, I should say, it was always, these were the people who couldn't keep a job, and they just called themselves entrepreneurs. And so when I was in school, I got a couple of pieces of advice that I thought were really strong. One is, somebody said, Ben, he said, success rises and falls on two things. It's who you know and what you've done. So focus on building your network and focus on producing results that you can measure. If you can do those two things, you'll have all the success that you want to in life. The second piece of advice actually came through the form of a book by a guy named Tom Peters, the big management guru that many of you know. He's become less popular in recent years, but definitely was popular in the 80s and 90s with In Search of Excellence and all the other things. But he wrote a book in 99, 2000-ish, so pre-social media and all that, called The Brand You, Y-O-U. And he basically laid out the groundwork for what we now recognize as the current reality of work. At the time, it was the future of work. And he basically said all work is temporary, that you as an individual should think of yourself like a corporation. You have time and skills that you can trade for projects and money. And as long as those are mutually beneficial, then you have a contractual relationship that is agreeable and positive. When those become misaligned, that's when it's time to move on. So I really brought that. And mind you, I graduated in the aftermath of 9/11. I also, growing up in Houston, Texas, I saw Arthur Andersen and Enron, two immovable objects, crumble, disappear in almost instantaneously. So when you think about that and you think about what was going on in culture, how that was shaping my own psyche, the fact that I was already transitioning in where I thought my career was going to be headed, that idea of the brand you really fit. But the hard part was that nobody was hiring somebody with that kind of mindset. Everybody wanted to put me in a box. And so I just decided I was going to, when I came to a fork in the road, I was always going to choose the one that was going to lead to an infinite number of possibilities. opportunities. And so everything that constrained my opportunities, I walked away from. Everything that expanded my opportunities, I walked into. And because I'm just a learner, like I call myself a professional nerd, just because I'm a learner at heart, for me, I always wanted the new experience. I mean, heck, even driving around town today, sometimes I want to get lost just because I want to find another way to get there. I mean, that's just me, being the explorer. And so I looked at every single job as temporary, as an opportunity to trade my skills and my time for money and projects. And in fact, even in that book, Tom Peters talks about keep a WOW project, WOW, WOW project journal. And for years, I kept that. And then the other thing that I did to expand that early on was what I called the 29-minute interview. And I would identify successful people in culture, in business, wherever, even in areas and trades and sectors that didn't matter, weren't that interesting to me. And I would write them a handwritten note because I knew it would get past the gatekeeper. And I would say, hey, this is who I am. I want to ask you 4 questions. I'm not trying to sell you anything, and I'd be happy to pay you for your time. Now, I always did that with my fingers crossed because at that time I couldn't afford anybody's 29 minutes, let alone my own 29 minutes. But thankfully, almost all of those people picked up the phone and reached out. They couldn't text me back then because we didn't do that. But it's hard to believe I'm old enough to think about that. But
you do not look it.
So they would almost always call, and when we get to the 29-minute mark, I'd say, "Oh my goodness, we're at 29 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time." And they're like, 29 minutes, forget it. I still got some more things to tell you. And I would literally listen to their journey about what are the key decisions that they made, what are their regrets, what are their things that they're most proud of, and what advice would they have for someone in my shoes. And I just listened. So here I am exploring, learning, trying new things, and learning from people who are really, really successful. In fact, the company I was working for at the time, a $600 million a year organization, in new employee orientation, they said we have a executive open door policy. You can meet with any of our VPs and above at any moment in time, just make an appointment. So me being the low man on the totem pole, I took their word at face value. It freaked my manager out. He thought I was blabbing, criticisms about him and the company and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, man, this has nothing to do with you. These are unbelievably successful people, and I just got to figure out how to get there because that's where I want to be. So I take all of that and just say it has not been necessarily a straight path in a lot of ways, but I think the ability and the agility that it developed within me to move in and out of different contexts, to be able to learn how to serve clients and serve executive leaders, to be able to bring products to market, the ability to manage the financial and the legal dimensions of business, the ability to problem solve at a very high level and be able to see the interconnectedness of organizations has uniquely positioned me and Velocity to be able to institutionalize what it means to shift from your current reality into your preferred future and create the operational structures necessary to sustain it. Because you can move any organization and any team in a one-time event toward a particular revenue goal. But if you want to sustain that over time, you have to fundamentally alter how it works and how decisions are made.
Mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, it sounds like you have an incredibly open and aware mindset. And I think more leaders today that are getting it, that are understanding the power of culture and the culture leads companies today. It's always led them in the past, but I think people are starting to realize how much culture has an effect on people. Then the strategy comes into place, and then all of your, the doorknobs and all that stuff comes into play. But I think it's right because when your manager was freaked out that you went to go take up the VPs and hire on their offer, that's a culture issue to me. Someone's afraid for their position.
Absolutely.
Right. That has intrinsic cultural value. And I think that's a really big part. And I just looked up the definition of velocity, rapidity of movement. I think it's fantastic. What a great name, because I think in this day and age, you're right. Things are moving super quick. And without having systems, processes, and workflows, by the way, that are living, breathing aspects or mechanisms within a business, once you finish your workflows and your processes, that's kind of the beginning. You have your foundation,
Yes.
but you got to be ready, because when things change or you identify new friction points, you got to alter, but you have the foundation.
That's exactly right. That's what I mean when I say responsive organization. I think in today's world, you have to, and in today's business environment, you have to be 100% committed to the success of the person you want to support, the person that you want to buy your product, the person that you want to have as a client, which means that you are so entrenched in their worldview, you understand their pain, you can anticipate their questions, you can dance with them, if you will, and then you can use that energy to bring back into your organization and adapt it however necessary to do that, because the way that culture projects their own personas onto brands suggests a very human transfer. Well, humans evolve over time, right? Our relationships with our wives and our kids, they evolve over time. We're not doing the same things with our teenagers that we were doing with them when they're 2. If we are, there's a problem. And so we have to evolve that over time. But what ends up happening is at some point in the maturity of the organization and maturity of the profit line, the margins become so good that we literally close our minds and close our ears to what the marketplace is telling us.
You got to be careful, because there might be a big truck coming around that corner.
That's exactly right. And the way that the scorecards, I talk a lot about this inside organizations. If you want to change behavior, change the scorecard. And the way that we are scoring a lot of senior leaders and even people throughout the organization is entrenching a reality that's becoming less and less valuable. One of the things that I find in mature businesses is that you have increasing margins and decreasing expenses, and you're becoming better at delivering that product. Now, in some sense, that's fantastic, right? Because you're delivering shareholder value, you're able to do more within that. But I always question, if the margins get too good, that means you are really at the tail end, or you got something very exclusive that nobody else has. And that's a very rare scenario. But in most cases, you're coming to the very end of that product life cycle, and you need to shave off some of that margin to begin to invest in R&D. Because if you're not anticipating what's coming next, you'll be surprised. And the truth is that the marketplace has been telling us everything that we need to know. We just have not created listening platforms that combine multiple points of data to help us make new decisions in real time, in the same way that we drive, right? I was telling this to a client the other day. I said, think about driving. You're constantly taking in information and reacting to that information. You don't get in a car and just say, I'm going to the store. You're looking at what's the speed limit, where am I, what's the stop sign, what's the other person doing, is the person next to me getting too close, and where am I in my speed? It's a series of course corrections, right?
Yep.
This is what it means to manage a business. It's a series of course corrections. But if you don't have a dashboard, think about trying to do that without stop signs, stop lights, road markers, or a speedometer. Holy cow, that would be impossible. Yeah, it'd be like literally just guessing, and that's where so many organizations are right now, and we've got to learn how to adapt again, and we've just forgotten that over the last 20 years. I mean, there's some significant.
Well, 2020 was a good reminder.
Yeah, well, significant things happened coming out of 9/11, right? We had Sarbanes-Oxley. We had a whole new wave of compliance issues that entered into particularly the publicly traded environments. And we had what I call the invasion of compliance officers and lawyers into the C-suite. And so we have spent the last 2 decades managing many of our organizations. And by the way, I have no problems with accountants and lawyers. I depend on them every single day. But when it comes to times of change, these are professional worrywarts. Yep. So they will be less willing to adapt than other personalities. And that's not always true, but in many cases, we've got to resupply the C-suite with people who are willing to exhibit the type of courageous leadership that really built so much of the industry that we see today. But
Innovation.
we so codified what happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that we're still trying to maximize the value out of that. And yes, we can take something from it, but we altered it dramatically coming out of World War II. We altered it dramatically coming from agrarian to industrial revolution, and so on and so forth. You can look back. We've got to take what's great and we've got to adapt to new environments. And that's where we've got to become fast, flat, and flexible. And there's only one way to do that.
Well, and I was talking with a good friend of mine, Christopher Lockhead, and he was talking about the Roaring 20s.
Yes.
I have a feeling we're going to start seeing during the Roaring 20s in the 1900s, 1920 and 1929, our economy grew by 42%. And there's indicators eerily similar that says that the 20s of this century are going to be the same. So, yeah, get ready, because I believe in my heart of hearts, and nobody knows the future. You can't tell. But
of course,
by seeing what's happening right now, you just had one of the busiest years of your life. And I think it's only going to get busier. So I think the need for you and your services are only going to increase. And so thank you for sharing all of your infinite wisdom with us. How do people get in touch with you to learn more?
So they can go to velocitystrategysolutions.com. That's our website. You can visit thevelocityfactor.com. That's our newsletter. I'm active on LinkedIn at Ben Stroup, Twitter at Ben_Stroup. And you can also find the Velocity Factor podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Just finished up season 1 and planning season 2. Super excited about what we were able to cover in that. And then last, you can also visit the ebook I released last year that really codifies much of the principles that I talk about with clients, called Master the Pivot. You can find that at masterthepivot.com. So those are some easy places to find me online. And I'll offer one more. If you want to text me, feel free to do so. My number is 615-436-3449, 615-436-3449. I may not always be able to respond immediately, but I will respond. I love talking to leaders. I love solving problems. I love learning about new scenarios and situations. And if I can't help, chances are I know somebody who can connect you, who can help you, or who can connect you with someone who can help you. So, man, if we really do, I just believe that generosity is the style of the universe. And if we can continue to help each other succeed, then there will be more than enough to go around.
Well, thank you, Ben Stroup. I really appreciate your time today. And I was just going to say, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up? And it sounds like you just did, but do you have anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
You know, one of the things that I've noticed coming out of last year is that, and it's kind of alluded to in the description of what we're talking about, is, don't solve the problem, solve the source of the problem. One of the things that I see in many organizations is that they saw lower operating costs, and because of the PPP loans and other efforts last year, you saw revenue really hold tight. And what that ends up happening is it ends up delaying systemic change that needs to take place. And it's always better to begin a process of organizational evaluation, design, development, and change management from a position of strength than weakness. Mm-hmm. And if you wait until you're on the decline, and so I think so many of the people that I see who are positioning themselves to win big and are now winning big because of what they did last year, used their margin to be able to invest in the future. So many that I find are at risk are doing well as it appears on the top line, but under the surface, there are some massive shifts taking place. And if we're not minding the data not just mining the data, but minding the data and making new decisions today based on that, then we can put ourselves at risk. So I just encourage you in doing that, is that if you are experiencing a revenue challenge or not experiencing a revenue challenge, revenue is always a lagging indicator. Look up your process and your system, find out what those mitigating circumstances are, identify those measures and dimensions and attributes, and begin to understand and define them, because that will help you get a clear sense of current reality, help you understand the dissonance between current reality and preferred future, and help you map that way there. And if you'd like some help doing that, I'd be happy to help you.
Seriously, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Ben. He's the president of Velocity Strategy Solutions. You can go check out his newsletter at thevelocityfactor.com/welcome. His email, send him an email, ben@benstroup.com, and say, hey, I saw you on Live with Bottleneck, and I really want to find out what you said about mindness instead of mining, or minding. Minding.
Yeah, exactly.
Mining. Get a hold of Ben and ask him your questions. He will definitely steer you in the right direction. You can follow him on Facebook. He's on LinkedIn. He's on Twitter. He's everywhere. Check out his podcast as well. Ben, thank you so much for sharing these incredible insights. They couldn't be more timely, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, appreciate your questions, appreciate the opportunity to share this platform with you. I love what you're doing, and I love the service that you're providing. And I think if anyone is feeling stretched and needs a way to reimagine what that looks like, where pre-pandemic what you were offering might have been looked at as unusual, it's becoming very normal. We finally arrived at a place in our culture and our work culture where we realize that geography and time are no longer requirements in order for us to operate as a team. And so
effectively and efficiently,
your ability to provide that infrastructure, to jumpstart that within organizations, these are the types of solutions that are going to be fundamental to future success. And so if you're looking for ways to grow and scale that growth, I can't imagine that someone wouldn't benefit from hanging out with you and spending some time and learn a little bit more about what Bottleneck does.
Well, and thank you very much, Ben. That means a lot. Yeah, we've definitely crossed that chasm, as Jeffrey Green says. Yes. We've definitely dropped that. And so I want to say thank you again. Is there any way you can hold on for just let me wrap?
Absolutely.
Up? Okay, hold on one quick second, and we'll be right back with you. I want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in to my conversation with Ben Stroup. I told you we had a doozy today. We were talking about no one cares until you sell something. Ben Stroup is the president of Velocity Strategy Solutions, and I cannot recommend reaching out to him enough. Seriously, like right now, today is a good time to reach out to him so that you get situated and make sure you're going down the right path to take on these changes. We did this. It took us 6 months to reimagine the way that the direction of our organization was going to take. Had we had Ben, we could probably cut that in half, or at least had a much better idea of where we wanted to go with that. Thankfully, we did have some great guidance. I would highly encourage you to reach out to Ben Stroup today and find out what you can do differently, perhaps. That being said, we've launched our new Live with Bottleneck TV channel. We call it BTV. You may have seen it in the intro. You'll see it in the outro there. It's on YouTube. You can see Ben here. You can also see hundreds of other videos from other interviews we've done, other fun videos that we're doing, and also some one-off videos, some educational videos, things like that to help you stop the bottleneck in your business. Go check it out and subscribe today. We'd really appreciate it. Coming soon, we're going to be talking with David Jennings. We're going to be talking about systemology, create time, reduce errors, and scale your profits with proven business systems. This is going to be on Thursday, April 15th at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Now, David Jennings wrote the book on systemology, and the guy is amazing. So you're going to want to tune into that one. We're taking a little bit of a hiatus as my wife and I go on a brief holiday here, but we will be back soon. And I would like to throw this out there and say, I'm writing a book. I even have an actual publisher. Can you believe that? Quit repeating yourself. It's all about build sustainable growth and positive culture into your business model. And I talk about all the things that we've done in order to achieve the 7-figure goal that we did in only 3.5 years of operating. And we're really, really excited for that to come out. can't wait. It's on Indiegogo today, so you can go to bottleneck.online/book. And love to see you support the book, and that'll be coming to you soon. Without any further ado, I'll go ahead and wrap up today. I want to say thank you so much, and don't forget, create your own ripple.